Hi everybody. Hello my fellow Americans. Hope you're having a good day. I'm having a little bit of a rough day, but not too bad. I can handle it, I guess. I want to ask you a question about... Now this is for the younger people, because I dedicated my life to, after I got sick, and I wasn't approved for disability, but when you have heart attacks regularly, it's very hard to hold down a job. Yet, disability denied me any help. So, I want to ask you guys, younger generation, what is it that you're going to stand for in your life? Now, I do believe everybody has a right to exist. I'm pretty open-minded. But I don't believe you have the right to take that existence and impose it onto somebody else, because they also have a right to exist as they are. And all this racism that I'm seeing against genders really bothers me. And the racism that I see coming out of the black people, I have no other way to describe you in individual units other than to describe your ethnicity. Even though for the majority of you, your ethnicity is American. But for those of you who are demanding reparations for slavery, this one has kind of really worked on my brain, because I have ancestors who fought to abolish it. And I have many ancestors that died, and their bodies were never recovered from those battlefields. They were basically buried where they laid. And it was a worthwhile fight. You want to know why? Because it was about freeing people from ownership of other people owning them. And I see all these young, beautiful, beautiful black women who should be taking the lead when it comes to slavery. Instead, they're taking a backseat and wanting a handout, because 200 years ago their ancestors suffered slavery. What I want to know from you is, what are you doing to continue the fight? It was in the 1970s that I fought for equality for my beautiful black brothers and sisters. And Asians, I do include you because there were many in our marches in Chicago. It was not all black people. It was a mix. There were even Native Americans in our marches. They just wanted equality. And so I want to know, what are your children doing to continue that fight? Are they getting on TikTok and YouTube and screaming they want reparations? Do they really think the fight against slavery is over? I think that's a valid question. And if they are demanding reparations, well, what are they doing about the current problem with slavery? Economics teaches you that in a growing base of wealthy people, they have to have workers. And the more the workers cost, the less profit they make. So a lot of systems have automated, don't even use human at all. most call centers nowadays that I get, there's some AI that you can't communicate with, and it's nothing but like a recording, and it's kind of senseless. The calls are just a waste of dollars from these tech companies using this kind of thing. But I want to know what you're doing in your own neighborhoods to stop the slavery. Do you think that gangs oppressing people is not slavery? Do you? Because it is slavery. And the cost to the individual is their life in most cases, or the poisoning of your fellow man who lives in your neighborhood with terrible drugs like fentanyl and methamphetamines and far other drugs that I don't even know of today. But this is a form of slavery. And the kids that are out there doing this are getting very little in return, but they are getting something back. So they're thinking, I'll move up the ladder if I can survive long enough. And, I'll be the next kingpin. Is this really what you want your kids going through? For all the young ladies, because that's mostly who I've seen screaming reparations. First of all, I have slave ancestry. I didn't own slaves. There's nowhere in the history of my ancestry that I can find any of my family ever owned slaves. But what I can find, even in my DNA, is that one of my great-grandmothers was a slave. So where does that put me in all of this? Since I did fight. I was out there and I was marching and I was talking to neighbors and I was walking up and down the streets talking to people, asking them to please vote yes for equality for women, men, black men and women, Asian men and women, Native Americans, asking for some kind of liberties be given to them, like college educations. If you were a Native American, you didn't qualify in America in the 1970s for an education at all, not even your grade school. Those communities were trying to educate with land that they could not use fruitfully. It did not benefit them. And they had lost the knowledge of their ancestors of how to farm and manage that kind of land. Because I did learn how to farm in Texas, where it's predominantly sand. Here I have more trouble growing where I actually have soil, because I'm not as familiar with growing with it. I'm learning. But I'm not able to grow enough to even supply my husband and myself with good food. So what are you doing that makes reparations honorable to give to you? Are you still carrying on the fight to stop it? Because it's happening in your communities. And you turn a blind eye to it. I lived in Texas for 30 years, and I saw human trafficking at its rawest. And I saw who they were trafficking. It was always women and children. And in some areas, of course, they don't advertise it and they hide it like a dirty secret in the closet. They hire these youth and young women into the drug markets, into the sex slaves, and sweatshops right here in the good old USA. And I want to know what you're doing. Are you carrying on the fight, or are you just looking for some injustice to claim so that you can get a handout from the government? And I see the Democrats are out there going, yeah, we're going to give it to you. And you never knew slavery. I never knew slavery. Yet I have a great-grandmother who was a slave. I have ancestors who fought against slavery. And I have many, many ancestors that never owned a slave. So how are you coming out to feel justified and right in asking for a reparation for something you won't even fight against? True that most of the enslaved people are coming through our south border. There's no argument there. But they are spreading around the country. They're spreading these slaves around the country. And what are you doing about it? I know that's not an easy question to have asked, but when you're trying to justify something that happened hundreds of years ago, you were never a part of, your mother was never a part of, your grandparents were never a part of, how can you justify it if you're not fighting against it still? And if you're fighting only for your skin color to get out of slavery, then what a bigot are you? I look like a little old white lady, right? And mostly I am. Most of my heritage is Viking. It comes out of Switzerland, Ireland, and the Nordic regions. That is predominantly my DNA. It's on Ancestry.com. But I can tell you right now, I fought for those people. What are you doing? Because every one of these young ladies that I've seen on here screaming for reparations, they're wearing big golden hoop earrings and necklaces, and their hair is beautiful, and their nails are fake and long, and they're dressed impeccably, and they open their mouths, and their speech is beautiful, except what they're saying is not intelligent. And it's full of bigotry and hatred. Is that what your parents marched with me for you to have? Is that what your grandparents marched with a woman like me for you to have? No. And you're dishonoring that. You're dishonoring that fight that is still continuing today. There are still slaves in Africa, except they're not shipping them across the borders. And well, they are right now, and they're calling it illegal immigrants. And they're going flooding into the UK, and most of these African people are actually being transported there against their will. They have had their will broken down, every resource taken from them. So they have nothing. Nothing. And what are you doing to fight for that? Before you ask for a reparation, make sure you're an honorable person. The Native Americans deserved what reparations they were able to get. And between the 1970s and the 1980s, and even into the 1990s, people were fighting for them to be able to educate their children off of the reservation, to give their learning an expanded view of what the world really is. You talk while you sit there on your electronics talking about slavery. You look ridiculous because you're not doing anything to stop it. You're just trying to use your skin color for clickbait. Oh, somebody oppressed me 200 years ago. You're 200 years old. Damn, you look good for 200 years old. Look, the reality of racism is that it's just one group of human beings being pitted against another group of human beings. And we should all be on the same side. All of us. So while you're screaming for reparations, are you dishonoring the battles of your ancestors that you're claiming were oppressed? While you oppress? You didn't learn anything from their struggles. You learned to hate and use it as an excuse to perpetuate the same behavior that we fought against. This is wrong. This is dishonorable. You want to honor your ancestors, continue their fight. I'm a Viking. I'm a fighter. That's what we do. Native Americans, they once were great, great warriors. But nowadays, the war can't be won this way or with a weapon. It can be won this way by reaching out to others, by finding those people who are being oppressed and trying to find help for them so that they can be free from their bonds of slavery. But while you're standing there with all your jewelry and your hair is perfect and your nails are done and you're dressed impeccably and you do have an education, you could tell it by the way you speak, but you could also tell by the way you speak that you picked and chose what you were going to learn and just let the rest go. To all of my fellow brothers and sisters of every ethnicity that lives here in the Americas, don't cry injustice if you're not in the fight to stop it. And these people who are getting on here, reparations, these are weak and cowardly people. They're not fighting a cause. They're just claiming for their own gain off of the honorable, savage wars that their ancestors fought. And yeah, white people fought. In fact, we were the 90% of the soldiers. Most of the soldiers never got paid. They were told they were going to be paid, but the war went bankrupt to the point our government, Lincoln, had to grab all the gold and silver he could confiscate from the wealthy to continue to at least feed his army. The reality of life is you don't deserve a reparation for something you never suffered and never fought against. And if you're preaching white hatred and black hatred, Asian hatred, Native American hatred, Hindu, Indian, if you're not in the fight to stop it, then your acts are cowardly and they have no honorability, and you will never be able to be honored because you did nothing to deserve what you're receiving. And if you think slavery is over, just ask any child coming out of Guatemala with two men who are not his parents or her parents, just to ask any Honduran mother who is on her way here trying to find her stolen children and then gets entrapped and trafficked herself, never to see her children again. So what are you doing to fight against slavery? It's not over. Slavery is not over. And I don't think any reparations should be paid to any generation that does not fight for the freedom and equality of all human beings. I love you. Even though I don't approve of your behaviors, I love you. And I'm sorry that you're so misguided. I'm sorry that your parents only shared ancient history with you, but manipulated that history so all you heard was the bad stuff. You never heard the good stuff. 40,000 black men died to abolish slavery in America. 40,000. And 240,000 white men died to stop slavery. Now, those who are screaming reparations would never watch a video like this because it makes them accountable for what they're asking for. And I know that's not the popular thing to do, ask you to be accountable for your own actions in today's modern world. I can see that all over the internet, and it's a reality that I thought our species was moving forward, and they weren't. They're moving backwards because of people coming out like this. My great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother was a slave. And making up lies. Good morning was an English term. And it was actually good morn. Not good morning. That's an American way of doing it. Good morn to you. That means glad to see you made it through another sunrise. Glad to see you. That's basically all it means. And I have heard this young lady, beautiful, beautiful young lady, who is wasting her breath, wasting her time with hate speech. Good morning was meant for the slave. No, it was not. It was not. Learn your facts. Learn a little bit more about the English language. It was a greeting and nothing more. And twisting it up and trying to manipulate it to make it sound like it was used as some atrocious slave act just shows how unintelligent you are. But the way you spoke, I know the intelligence is in there. Use it. You want reparations for something that's not over? You want reparations for something you're not having any part of to stop? Why should you get paid when there are still people out there fighting against this? What makes you different? To me, you have made yourself less worthy. I have enough black heritage, slave heritage I should call it, to ask for reparations. I found that out today. But I'm not going to do it. You know why? Because the fight's not over. And it has nothing to do with color. And if you think that the black people were the only people sold out of Africa from Africans and brought to the Americas to work as slaves, have you talked to a Chinaman? Excuse me, I mean no offense by that phrase. But have you spoke to someone who has come out of Asia that was forced on slave ships into the West Coast? If it wasn't for the Asian community, our railroad probably would not be where it's at. It wouldn't be going from coast to coast. Yes, you worked on plantations. They were forced to mine, and they were forced to work on the railroad and do dangerous tasks your ancestors were never asked to do. So, if you want to talk with me about slavery, let's talk about it today, as it's currently ongoing. And it happened to white men, and it happened to white women. White women were the original slaves here, not blacks. Because women were considered property until in the 1970s. Yeah, from the, 1600s all the way up to 1970, women were considered property. And now we still have men going around, I'm a woman. No, you're not. And you're not going to get me to agree that you are. Even if you dress like a woman. And even if you have your hoo-hoo cut off, you're still a man. You want to know why? You still carry that X, Y, or X, confused, that chromosome. Sorry, when I'm upset, I get a little bit confused. And sometimes I'll go back and correct myself. But that is also part of the joy of getting older. But I dedicated myself when I had to go through the heart surgeries and then the cancer fight and then another heart surgery and another cancer fight. And I learned, okay, I'm not going to get help from my government. I tried to keep working as long as I could. That's why I'm only 2 credits shy. And they tell me, well, you can take credits from your husband. Why in the world would I doom him to what I'm facing? I take credits from him so that I can get the money I paid into the government back in a small form. I don't get it all back. When it comes time, he's going to get less if I take his credits. Okay? So I can't go there. For an old woman like me, it's okay though. Because after dedicating my life to my family, when I couldn't work outside the home anymore, I did earn a little bit of money under the table, I'm not going to lie, garage sales and stuff like that, selling anything I could when necessary to make a little bit of money. And to help my husband, who was supporting us all. He was working and putting into Social Security that they now want to take some of his to give to me and give him less. That's not fair at all. And it's not right. And it's not right that I'm 2 credits shy, paying into the Social Security, so I lose all of it. And you want to scream you want reparations. And you haven't done anything to earn it. You should be ashamed that you are dishonoring your ancestors who fought for you to have what you have today. They didn't give up their lives so that you could try to scam other hard-working taxpayers out of their money because you feel an injustice. was done to you. Well, I'll tell you what, you should take and ask those reparations from Africa, who originally sold you to the slave owners here. And just like now, the people who owned slaves were rich and wealthy. They were the 1%. But you want to blame everybody. You don't want to put blame where it belongs, because, well, you can't get as much out of it. So it's a scam. I'm going to call it like I see it. I'm not trying to offend you. I'm trying to inform you. And if you don't like what you're learning, then you're going to have to stand up and show some courage, like your ancestors, and fight against the continuing slave trade happening here in America. And if you think that it's just black people, you are sorely misguided. I love my country. I love the future that I see it could have. But I know it's got to go through the final battles. But I do know that the generations that followed these heroic ancestors are nowhere near as heroic. And they hide behind masks, and they hide behind vicious hate, and they hide behind injustices they never experienced. And if you call that honorable, then I guess honor is dead. And to all you adults who might watch my video, who might, because my videos don't get a lot of views, and it's because I'm not trying to monetize my channel. I'm just trying to share what I've learned in this life with others, so that maybe they can avoid some of the traps I fell into. And when I'm arguing about illegal immigration, I'm arguing against slavery, pure and simple. Over half the children that came over with the border crossings that Biden allowed, over half those children were not with their parents. They were abducted children. And now, most of those immigrants are living in camps. They have no homes. Their money is running out because there's limited time on how much they can receive and how long they can stay in the shelters before they have to find work. And what they didn't know, what Biden lied to them about, is that there's plenty of work. No, the unemployment statistics that you're spouting are from people who obtained unemployment benefits for losing their jobs. And I'm going to tell you right now, probably 75% of the unemployed never qualified for unemployment, or their employers just refuse to pay it because they can do that. So those numbers are not accurate. I'm gathering probably 60 to 65% of Americans are totally unemployed. All Americans. It's like the homeless that they count. How do they count those numbers again? They go into these places and oh, there's a person living on the street, there's a person living on the street. Is that how they get those numbers? No. They get those numbers based off of the foreclosures and evictions. Right, has nothing to do with the people who are actually on the street already before the new numbers are counted. those people will not be counted because they're not going through foreclosure, or they're not going through evictions. They're already on the street and have been, so they're not being counted. They say the homeless in America is less than 4 million. 4 million is a lot. But in truth, it's closer to 10 million are homeless. Take the statistics that you're given about things with a grain of salt. Because remember, those statistics are biased. They want to reflect a certain image, and they're only going to count what they need to make that quota. And the rest are uncounted. So if you're young, these things, it took me decades to learn. And as far as my Mexican brothers and sisters go, I've always welcomed you. When you didn't come in with these mass droves, you were just workers looking for some work. But your grandchildren, like my grandchildren, can't find jobs. You know why? Because those jobs aren't available anymore. I see hiring signs in my small community, but they don't ever hire anybody. You don't ever see any new faces in those Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart. You might see a few new faces, but not that many. You're always seeing the hiring signs, but you're not seeing them filling those positions because they're doing all they can on the restricted budget they have to pay the employees the small amount of staffs that they're allowed to have. Now, my kids mostly work in those fields, and the turnover rate is enormous. Enormous. When my husband realized that for a $12 an hour job, he was facing over 1,000 other applicants in my small community. People were coming out of other communities to apply for jobs in this larger township of only 13,000 people. They can't find any work where they are in their small communities. And most of what their parents were taught is not passed on to them. I don't know why. I really don't know why. Okay, I gotta close this because I have been on here longer than I've ever been. I'm surprised it hasn't screamed at me that this video is too big. But do you deserve those reparations is my question. What makes you an honorable ancestor of those who fought for your freedom?